Hey, and welcome to Lean Nation Live on Ustream, and happy Wednesday to everybody out there. And as we broadcast these shows and grab thought leaders from all over the U.S. and especially in the Northeast, we have so many great universities, so many great thought leaders and people and activity going on here that I just find it really how profound it is that in the Lean Toolkit, the visualness of everything. You have Gwen Galsworth talking about visual learning. You have Toyota with all the different katas from Mike Rother's kata, pictures and drawing, and trying to get emotional connections with people. And even during the presentations that I do, I try and do it with a lot of pictures and a lot of things to get that same connection, to get a feeling, to get a true understanding. And as we get visual and draw things, we can more rapidly get people on the same page, get them up to speed quicker. And we have just one such person here today with us. We have Dean Meyers, and Dean is a visual problem solver, and he's at deanmeyers.net. So you can check that out. We're going to post some stuff here. So Dean, come on in here. Come on into we got to shut our door. Our studio here, we have all kinds of crazy things going on. But Dean, Linda met Dean in New York City at a Thought Leaders Convention. Come on in, Dean.
Hey, Carl.
Welcome to the Lean Nation, and I'm going to slide over here. And today, we're going to have Dean do some things on the board with us. We're going to get visual. Right. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Dean.
Sure. As Linda may or may not have told you, I come from a background which is about marketing, design, communications. I have a touch of manufacturing. One of my first jobs was working in a manufacturing environment where I was designing tools for the manufacturing process. So I have worked a very long time in marketing and advertising and technology, and I have an arts background as well,
right.
Some of it being design and graphics. And so,
well, it kind of complements because they're all right. They're all right brain functions.
Yes,
it's not the left brain, the structure, and this and that. Because if you're going to be a tool designer and do kind of neat things, you're going to be in manufacturing or advertising. You got to be right brain, creative, have fun, and look at it differently.
Right.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Absolutely. So I worked for Apple Computer a very long time ago at the introduction of the Macintosh computer. And the challenge there was, as someone who was trying to explain and teach people how to use this new thing called the graphical user interface, we call it the GUI, the GUI, I had to be able to explain how to move from just straightforward thoughts with words to using a graphical kind of interface in order to have actions happen. And so I have been exploring for a long time how to solve problems and how to explain solving problems in a visual manner in order to improve communication and to make communication easier and more direct.
Well, you got to get people up to speed really fast and get everybody on the same page.
Right. Absolutely.
Once you start having stragglers and you have things going, people going in a different direction, you never get done what you think you're going to accomplish.
That's true.
So you have this on our board here.
Yes.
Is that what we're going to get into?
That is what we're going to do today.
Okay, so explain the 5 diagrams in 15 minutes. What's that all about?
Well, this is a framework that I created. I'm part of a group called VizThink, and VizThink is a loose association of
V-I-Z-T-H-I-N-K. VizThink. This is like who was that Monty Python or who's that movie guy in?
I don't know what you're talking about. Sometimes I just don't know your reference.
All right, go ahead. I'll think about it later. VizThink,
and you can go to vizthink.com.
Okay.
And there are meetings in quite a few cities around the world where people who are interested in improving and using visual communications and visual thinking get together, and many of the groups will put on workshops and so on and so forth. And so I was looking at ideas of how to help people do visual problem solving in a very quick and efficient manner. And it dawned on me that diagramming is a very useful tool. It's taught to us in school in a variety of ways. but not necessarily in a generic way of solving problems across the board and different things. And so I came up with this idea of using, there are 5 diagrams in particular, of using these 5 diagrams to work through a lot of different kinds of problem solving, and it does not require the ability to draw. That's a very important
It's
thing.
more a methodology. You're thinking,
It's a framework,
yeah,
yes.
a framework.
A framework
You got a
for problem
framework.
solving.
Yep. Okay.
Right. So why don't I just go ahead and launch into it?
Yeah, please.
So the first thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to ask for a little technical assistance.
What do you need?
You might want to put up the very first slide, which will show the first, the general collection of these diagrams.
Okay.
The first one that I'm going to demonstrate is what's called a mind or a concept map.
Okay. Yeah.
The most important thing to know about that is that whatever comes into your head, or if it's a group process, whatever comes into the group's head, has the right and should be put up on the board. It's done with free association, and there's no judgment at all. And if you want to kick back now to this board, I'm going to actually do a problem-solving session.
Once we get viewers, there we go. Once we get a drawing, we haven't figured out how to focus on the whiteboard. There we go. Go ahead.
So the overall concept that I'm going to demonstrate is a very simple problem that happens to everybody almost every single day of the week, and that is, what am I going to have for breakfast?
Yep. And you and I had the discussion earlier that I have 4 young adults. And there's never any food in the house. They don't know what they want, and they can't understand what's going on.
Right. So the big question is, what am I going to have for breakfast?
Okay.
So with a mind map, I start to put up concepts. And I'm not going to draw pictures, although I could. I'm just going to start to free associate simple things that I could have. I could have bacon.
Yeah.
I could have toast.
Yeah.
In the drink category, coffee.
So you have this kind of divided here. You have some food groups on one side and drinks on the other. Is that correct?
Right.
What I'm looking at? Okay.
Right.
Yep.
And you notice I'm starting to extend from coffee. Oh, but I'll need milk for the coffee.
Okay.
So
relationships with each
Right.
other. Okay.
Exactly. And so you see it's starting out, here's the big concept, and I'm starting to stream further down, and then I can keep going down this trail, and it could go on forever and ever and ever.
Okay.
So I'm starting to get these ideas of stuff I'm going to have, and there's not necessarily any judgment involved. Oh, I just realized I probably want some eggs.
Yeah.
Toast probably needs the butter too.
Yep.
So again, I'm starting to think about relationships and things like that. Very simple free association kind of thing. That's my first one. So that's the mind map. Now, I'm going to go to the next level of figuring out. And here we're going to start to
So
actually,
we'd save these.
Yes.
We'd put these on Post-it stickies and put it up on the wall.
That's right.
Yeah. This is just for the show that we're erasing them, but save them. Yep.
Yeah.
Got it.
Very often what I do is I'll get a not just a whiteboard, but one of those paper boards. I actually have one in the other corner of the room, flip chart style.
Yep.
Do it, rip off the sheet, and put it next to one.
And how much time do you allow for something like this? Because sometimes it seems like it takes forever to get somebody even initiated to start doing this mind map. And then how much time do you want to spend on it, and can you go back to it as we go along?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And I'm going to talk about that in a minute too.
Okay. So just tell me to shut up when
No, that's fine. This is
I'm trumping in on you.
that's fine. Okay. The next is what I'm going to call the 2x2 matrix. It's also called a window pane. And what I want to try and do here is start to add a little bit of, associate a little bit of judgment or value to the different choices.
Okay.
Now, for instance, I had this whole stream of things up on the board. I didn't know if they were going to be, if they were going to have inherent value or not.
Yeah.
But let's say one set of values is if they're of bad food choices.
Yeah. So we're thinking health conscious. Here.
Right.
Yeah.
And on this side, I'll say healthy.
Yep. Because we could have put ice cream in my household. The boys would have had ice cream up there.
Well, we are going to put something like that. And on this corner, again, we're going to go from essentially what we think of as low to high.
Yep.
We're going to put unhealthy. Right?
Yep.
To extremely healthy.
Okay.
So I'll now do a little bit of drawing.
Yep.
You know, a little bit of, here's some bacon.
Yep. We used to have a boar head up here. You missed him. I took him home. That would have been great for the show. But anyway, go ahead, bacon.
And we know in theory that bacon is probably unhealthy and bad for us.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, actually, you know what? I don't have this the right way. What I need, I have bad to healthy, and this should be
speed, maybe.
Let's say. Here we go. We'll say low taste to delicious.
Gotcha. Okay.
Now that's really, now we have the matrix working. This is much better.
Okay.
The point being that we create tension or conflict within the matrix.
Okay.
So let's go back to our bacon example, which we know bacon is probably delicious, but probably bad for us.
Yep.
Whereas a wheat germ drink,
yes,
right?
I think we'd be in this one, wouldn't we?
Well, wheat germ drink probably is, yes, I'd say it's probably low taste but healthy. You see, I'm already.
That's okay. It's hard. It's hard. You know, it's hard to get this going. This is a first on the Lean Nation that we're bringing another median into form.
There we go.
Yep.
Now, what about something that I would have is probably egg whites.
Right.
All right. And that, for me, is somewhere a flavored low-fat yogurt. I might actually consider that. I happen to like the taste of that.
Yep.
And so what I'm starting to do is create a I'm driving towards a certain direction.
Yep.
That I'm trying to drive towards something that's healthy and something that's going to be tasty.
Okay.
And I may have to do something in a compromise mode here, but that's the point of the matrix.
But the X and Y axis here, Dean, and I'm going to ask about that. The X and Y axis are kind of critical because these are accesses, they're your personal accesses at this point.
Right.
But this could be a corporate direction access that
Absolutely.
we need to know what's the low, what's the high, what's the good, what's the bad.
Right.
So with teenagers at home for breakfast, generally this one might be speed here. They were talking about speed.
Absolutely. We could use speed
We could
use cost.
Could use cost, or we could just use, personal preference. So with each of the kids, we've got to figure out what is your judging criteria, rather than playing the victim and saying there's no food in the house.
Right.
Start giving us some facts of what's your expectation of the food.
Here's another way of looking at it too.
Yep.
And we'll use the same matrix. Or we'll switch the matrix up a little bit, and we'll still use taste. Delicious. No flavor. As opposed to, let's say, we're going to do from most difficult to easiest, right? So,
Yep.
Lots of prep, meaning they have to cook,
Yep.
to pre-made.
Pre-made. Yep.
Now that's going to swap things out. That could put. All right. Well, bacon is probably going to stay up there, but boxed cereal. A cereal bar.
Cereal bar.
That might
There
be
you go.
enough.
Might be enough.
Okay.
So you're
so
driving
use
people to something, you're getting facts versus opinion, drawing it out, and this is the mental model that goes on in our brain that sometimes we just get confused with. Got to put it on paper.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so let's look at the next the next set of charting ideas or diagramming ideas. Again, a little bit more sophisticated now. And this one is, maybe you might want to put this one up.
So,
Great. This is going to be the system map.
Okay.
Now, there are different kinds of system maps, and I'm using one example that I learned because I think it's very helpful, and particularly if one thing that I started to understand about lean is about identifying waste. That's one of the biggest things about the lean environment.
Correct.
And one thing I have noticed in my own involvement in the business world and in having manufacturing is to figure out where are there extra steps. I'll just say it very generically like that.
Fine.
So let's talk about this idea of what's the point of using a circle for the system map. Essentially, the map or the circle represents a boundary.
Mm-hmm.
And what's inside the boundary is basically what's inside my environment. And my environment, in this case, for having breakfast, is going to be my apartment.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that that's that. And within my apartment is a subsystem, which is going to be the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have a place to eat. And I'm sort of breaking down the subsystems that exist within the boundary.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens, though, if I just say, well, I want to eat something, but I don't know if I necessarily want to prepare it and eat it here, or if I want to go to a particular restaurant or diner right on the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if I'm going to be cooking, then probably I also have to figure out if I have the food supplies.
Right.
So this is going to be, we'll just say the grocery.
Your supply chain.
Right.
Store, supply chain, whatever, right? Yep.
And then, again, I'm using circles and text. The only other thing I might need to add in is some sort of arrows. Essentially, the store is going to be supplying into here.
Mm-hmm.
The diner, essentially, is that kind of activity.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I can, and again, thinking about lean stuff, this is where you can almost always find tons of
Waste.
Right.
Exactly. This is handoff. It's communication, it's travel, it's transportation, it's inventory. You go to the store, you're not buying one thing.
No.
It's wasted motion, keeping going back to the store for every step that you do.
Exactly.
But this is kind of the scenario in lean that we think about, that this bigger circle here could be the four walls.
Perfectly so.
Your four walls.
It's any
Can
kind
we
of
control? If we have things inside our four walls, you already have a kitchen. You could draw the refrigerator here too.
Exactly, and the refrigerator would be
is in the subset of the kitchen.
Right.
Okay, so I'm following with that. So your refrigerator. So now, if you have everything there, and also in the kitchen is if you're going to be preparing, high prep, low prep,
right.
that you have your stove or range or panini maker or whatever
Right.
it is that you have. That if it's inside my four walls, I can probably do it very quickly and control the outcome.
Exactly.
Once we step out of this circle, outcomes are, you're relying on that the diner has exactly what you want.
Exactly.
Probably would, but there might be some kind of special hash or poached eggs or whatever. It might be a big line, big queue.
Right.
And the store, the grocery store, you have to go to the store, and now you have to do a lot of hunting and things like this. So in the lean world, this is very applicable to circle of influence or circle of concern, Stephen Covey type concept as well. So go ahead.
Right.
Yep.
So that's now our 1, 2, 3, our
third item.
Our third diagram. Now, who thought that breakfast could be so complicated? But in 15 minutes, we're making our way through. I think that we're pretty good for time.
I think that if I do this exercise with my kids, that by the time we get to step number 3, they're just going to grab a breakfast bar and a juice and stop saying that there's no food in the house.
Now we're really starting to think about the decision-making process.
All right.
And I'm just going to use the 1, 2, 3. Now, the version that you have on the screen, I think, is a 10-tick line.
Okay.
But I'm just going to put up a 5-tick line. This is a force field, and this was This was created by a psychologist in England, Mr. Levine, who decided that he wanted to evaluate what were the forces behind people making decisions, if they were what we would call driving forces, or if they were restraining forces. So I'll put it simply.
What do you mean driving forces and restraining forces?
This is sort of a more sophisticated pros and cons list.
So this isn't I want it or I need it kind of thing. This is a little bit different.
Right. This is about judging the factors behind how you're going to make the decision. And what you do is you put the question up on top. And here's my question.
Go ahead.
All right. Oops. If I'm going to have breakfast, should I eat a healthy one?
Yep. Okay.
And so what are going to be driving factors towards eating a healthy breakfast for me? One of the factors might be whether or not I have a cholesterol issue I have to worry about. And if I would, and I think it's important, I would, again, this is all visual, I would give it about 5 ticks on the line.
And where would you label that now so we know that we're talking about just over on the left-hand margin? Cholesterol, yeah.
Right. I know I wrote it a little bit small, but
that's okay.
It can go anywhere in there. It's a little bit small on camera, but should I eat a healthy one? Do I have to worry about cost? Not really. Breakfast isn't necessarily within the range of breakfast things. Isn't going to be too expensive. I'm going to put this out here a little bit.
Okay.
Is time a factor? Again, for me, not so much.
Okay.
Is prep a factor? Well, this morning, prep is driving me a little bit.
Okay.
Is flavor a factor for having a healthy breakfast? Yes. It's really important because if I'm not satisfied, then I'm going to start snacking and eating junk and throw up.
Okay.
So what have I got here? I've got 5, and 3 is 8, all right, and 5. So I can start to add up, and put my scores down here. What have I got? I'll make that
1, 3.
1, 3.
Right.
And so, again, if we call this a sophisticated pro and con, if this is the pro side, then most likely, yes, I should have a healthy breakfast.
Yep.
That's where I'm getting at with this.
Okay.
So this is a force field, and I think it's, again, it can go, to go back to your question, can you do these over and over? Yes, you can break down the entire chain of decision making into all the individual pieces and evaluate each factor with a pro and con list.
And as you do this, Dean, you start looking at this that Toyota does their strategic thinking on A3. A3 is just the paper size, 1117. And you've probably seen that as you've been reading lean blogs and things like this. So you're just taking something visually laying it out there for everybody, get everybody up to speed, get everybody in the moment, get everybody on thinking about this specific thing. But there's a lot of supporting documentation to this, because if you had a cholesterol issue, it's not something that just popped in your head. You know your cholesterol is XYZ number, it's very high, so you have to go to the doctor and treat it, you have to do different things, you might have to take medication, and there's a lot of supporting documentation.
Right.
This is just taking reams and reams of supporting documentation and laying it out into a pictorial sense.
Exactly, and also making it, what's the point of laying it out in a pictorial sense is to get to the decision making about it very quickly.
Very quickly.
Because what happens with using words, and this is something I was talking about with somebody recently in marketing, is that to list out specifications over and over and over again, we have to remember we talked about this, and then we talked about that, and we talked about this, and we talked about that, and we're relying on our memory to pile up all of this information. When we use something as quick and dirty as a simple diagram, we know that a long line means a lot of something, and a short line means very little something.
Right.
And so when you have a bunch of long lines, obviously, if you see a bunch of long lines horizontally pulled out, then we know that something's going on here. It's a bunch of small, short lines. And so visually, these are much faster memory tricks to help us remember what we were trying to talk about as a whole.
Yep.
This is the last one. This
is number 5.
Right. This is the 5th one, and this is I call it a storyboard or a flow chart, and it can be pictorial, it can be words, and here.
I'm going to keep breaking off tape for you.
Sure, if you would. So I decided I needed to eat a healthy breakfast. If you recall, I had various options like egg whites, and there were some other things that were acceptable to me.
Yeah.
And so I just
yogurt, some other things.
Yogurt.
Yeah.
So I just took some pictures with my iPhone.
Okay.
And I created.
You have tape up there too, Dean.
Oh, great! I created a storyline. What I have here are the ingredients. In this case, I've got some low-fat cheese, and I've got eggs. It's going to be egg whites and some fruit to give the flavor factor that I needed. Was important to me. The next step in the process is to get to the preparation, and here I am mixing up the eggs.
Okay.
The next process, what I didn't put on the list was I have some vegetarian sausage.
Smart.
Very healthy.
Yep.
And here I am in the actual preparation of it.
Right.
And then the last picture, which I'll hold up. Let's see. I don't know if your camera can see it closely.
Dean had a guest.
My lovely, breakfast.
So these are great tools, in the lean process. These are the foundations for kind of standard work. Giving some instructions and giving a visual picture before you even walk in there, so you want to have these kind of things.
Right.
And how do you use these now? This is number 5 tool.
Right. This is the 5th.
Flow or storyboard.
Right.
So you're showing the process here.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So is your house laden with all this kind of stuff?
This is the blessing.
You live in New York City, so it's got to be either have to have a big apartment or very small storyboards.
Actually, the nice thing about having whiteboards and having computers is that you can draw this kind of stuff. You can take the pictures and you can put it up on the screen, and then you can keep track of it very easily and pull it back up as you need it. But yes, there are times when I've had to resort to putting up multiple sheets of paper.
And this is one thing that in the lean world, are desktops. And if you were in sales and marketing, you understand how critical the computer is. And even in your business now, being a thought leader and sharing your knowledge about, being visual, getting visual problem solving out. Think about the desktop laden with all those icons. Did you meet Ronnie out here in our shop?
I believe I did.
Did he show you his icon maker?
No, I didn't see that.
Oh my God. Ronnie's so smart with this. And what he does is take pictures of the icons, because every file folder that you probably have on your desktop, or every program, you have a visual, emotional connection to what's in there. So think if you could take that picture and throw that picture on there, so you could just look at the pictures, how much faster you could go through your desktop and get to exactly what you want. Because we all know, it's in the upper right-hand corner below this one. I kind of know it's next to the green one. Instead, the pictures, boy, how much time could you save during the day?
Oh, tremendous. One thing that did happen, actually, on your floor earlier was somebody asked me how I can actually use these.
Perfect.
And she said, I have a situation where I have something. She said, I have a particular part. She didn't describe what the part was, but whatever the part might be, it could be a jig. I don't know exactly what it was, but the point being,
it's a part. It's something that she has some question or confusion or just something that she needs to do.
So here are the bins, and she's got stuff sitting in the bins, and she said, I can't remember where so and so is, and she said, and do you have a visual trick for me? I said, well, you need to identify it with something visual. She said, well, I already put a label on it.
Yeah, she puts a label on it.
She said, but that doesn't help. I said, no, when I say something visual, I don't want you to put words. I want you to put a graphic symbol that means something to you. She said, a star. How about if I put a star on this, you know?
A particular one. There we go.
There we go. We'll put a star up.
Yep.
Doesn't even have to be very artistic.
Right.
She said, oh yeah, I could put a star on it, and then I always look, and that's where I know that will be. I said, exactly. Visual problem solving in the most simplest format. Why? Because words require processing.
Oh, God, yes. Oh, they take so much.
Visual symbols
Yeah.
do not.
It's crazy how that works. Our minds work that way with visual symbols. And you know, sometimes people, Dean, just need to know that they have the permission to say, okay, you know, we need that data. We need all those other things for this reason, because this is how we talk to our vendors. If we send them a picture of a star, they don't know what the star is.
Right.
It has no emotional connection, no meaning to them. But, you know, in this whole space, on this label, you know, if you gave them this space, this quadrant here,
Mm-hmm.
and say, you guys can put whatever you want there. Whatever you want. Whatever helps you find that quickly, associate that to your work, and to help you find things and process to add value to our customers and improve the throughput time and cycle. Go at it.
Absolutely.
Go at it.
The other thing I said to her was, and this you will appreciate because this again goes back to one of your early questions, putting up those 5 diagrams and having those sheets up there.
Right.
Again, I showed you in about 15 minutes how to do this, but you can turn this into a many-day, many-layered project, particularly with things like the force field diagram.
Yep.
If you start to break down these questions, and so that it could be 25 questions, and each one of these questions gets its own force field because there are just that many factors involved with that particular question.
Mm-hmm.
So, to follow this up, I said to her, by the way, when you have finished, if after about 3 weeks you've been looking at that star and you've gotten to the point where the star no longer has meaning to you,
Right.
then swap it out into I'll do a crescent moon.
Yeah.
Anything that will become a fresh visual trigger
Okay.
to you.
So give me that fresh visual trigger, because now I'm just a little bit confused.
Sure. She had the
Because-
star. She put the star up.
She put the
there.
star on.
She put the star on.
Yep.
She said, "Oh, that's a so and so."
Yeah. And is she swapping it out because the star really didn't get the connection that she thought, or is she swapping it out because it became
She
so
started to stop seeing it
Oh, she started to stop seeing it.
because she's been looking at it every day for 3.5 weeks or 4 weeks, and she may have only needed the thing once every 2-week rotation. And she's gotten to the point where she now starts to look past that star
Okay.
because
Yep.
she's seen it so often. It's looking for the same thing in your closet.
Yep.
You know that shirt for a guy. You know that shirt is in the closet. You know that tie is in the closet. You know, you know that pair of shoes are in the closet. You've looked at it so often that you've stopped seeing it because you haven't needed it at the moment. So that's why I'm saying, now come up with another thing that's gonna be a trigger because
So don't be married. So in essence, what you're saying is, don't be married to visual cues when they start becoming non-visual and you don't see them anymore.
right when they become invisible because of the repetition
Okay.
of what you've seen.
So don't be afraid to change it up.
No.
Don't be, and that's really one of the premises for Lean. This PDCA, plan, do, check, act, or adjust, and know that you have all these mini circles going on, that if we're going to start doing this, make things that are meaningful.
Right.
But you could theoretically leave, if the star means something for a year until the end of eternity, then the star's doing its
The
job.
star is doing its job.
It's not doing its job. Get rid of it. Do something else.
Right.
Okay. All right. Okay.
There's one other aspect of visual problem solving that that I think might be interesting, and that's about graphic recording.
Okay.
And what's just come up on your screen is the graphic recording that I did at a recent event called the World Business Forum.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically what graphic recording or visual sketch note taking is to use not just words, but to start to put in visual metaphors or other kinds of visual reminders of what happened at a particular event. It can be, of course, a very small meeting. It could be a phone call.
Yeah.
But the point being that doing this kind of note-taking or recording adds so much more stimulation to the memory that you are able to process an awful lot more, number one. You're usually able to remember a great deal more. And the kinds of things that you remember also are different. For instance, if you took just a stream of notes, well, all you would see is a bunch of gray lines when you look at the page. But if you start to put in visual metaphors or use color, it starts to add importance to particular things that came out from the conversation, from the event.
Well, generally, when you're at especially an event like the World Business Forum, is that you're hearing people giving alternative thought patterns. You're trying to get an emotional connection. So what happens, Dean, and maybe you can help correct me, is that as you're listening, you're taking this in, but your brain is also associating it with past experiences and things that you know that you're going to go back and affect change in your organization, or things that have been bothering you that maybe you have resolution to now. So if you do some pictures, is that kind of what's going on as you're thinking and making these associations and doing these graphic recordings?
Well, there were two ways of doing graphic recordings. The ones that are showing on the screen, essentially, I'm a very passive participant in this. And the idea behind these is essentially to be as objective and true to the event as I can be in using words and pictures.
Okay.
There's another way of using graphics with note-taking, which is more the facilitation process or visual facilitation.
Okay.
And with that, I might, if it were my role to help the decision-making process, my drawings might actually be more subjective. So I might draw more exclamation points or even frowning faces of ideas that come up, or possibly dangerous situations, in order to give a more graphic punch to just putting down on the piece of paper. We all decided this was a bad idea.
Gotcha.
As simple as that, but it has a very powerful effect.
So think about all the kids in high school now. We're just talking about all the kids in high school. They're doodling all the time.
Yes.
So think if our B schools, come on and sit down. You can sit down now.
Sure.
Dean can sit down. And think about in our business schools, in our high schools, if they took that energy and gave them some processes that is, maybe you're taking notes, this might be a way for you to really retain and, understand the capacity. Turn that doodling into something more powerful and meaningful.
Yes, absolutely. There's a woman named Sunny Brown who is working on a project she's calling the Doodle Revolution, and she's trying to promote the active use of doodling and that sort of freestyle, spontaneous drawing at every level to help people tap into the kind of subconscious resources that they have to do problem solving. Almost, I believe, all the presidents were doodlers, or have been and are doodlers. There are records of them, and their doodles have been stored away.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily, the doodling itself doesn't necessarily reflect a specific visual answer to a problem. It's just the process of allowing the mind to...
It's getting into the right brain.
Yeah.
It's getting out of the left brain into the right brain. Because the problems today, and you know this, the problems today are such just huge proportion. They're sometimes vague problems. They're so multi-pronged problems.
Yes.
That traditional, conventional thinking will not solve and get you to an answer,
Right.
or get you even close to a root cause.
Yes.
So now you need a lot of creativity, and you need to think of things, a lot of real mutual learning, collaboration,
Yes.
deep thought, and then just letting your mind free to solve them.
Mm-hmm.
You can't solve them in traditional ways of solving. This isn't mathematics that you can go through, formulas and figure it out.
The other thing too is I think that we have become more and more accustomed to needing to get to resolving issues quickly. We're impatient.
Oh, God, yes.
Certainly,
we all are.
right. And I can't even say it's a generational thing as much as it's just the way we function now over time. And using visual tools.
Yeah.
Just does help speed up the process, and hopefully, if the tools are good, because they are, I wouldn't say that they're not 100% of the time right. Sometimes we would hope that when you're using visual tools, it also helps to not only speed up the communication, but to make it clearer. Because when asking, does this mean, or does this get at the heart of what we're talking about, or does this get at the heart of what we're talking about?
Yeah.
And again, I'm being very simplistic.
Yeah. No, it's understood. And with that being said, that lean, and I just showed you one of our think tank areas.
Yes. Terrific.
That play 80%. Ed, what was that book that we read about 80%? Remember, it was the 80% book.
Yeah, what was that?
I don't know. We'll post it on Facebook.
Post it up, yeah.
But the impetus of the book was, you can't solve for 100% of everything. If you can get 80%, and everybody be under the understanding, we're solving for 80%, guys. We don't have time to solve for 100%. And let's move on, and, we'll circle back around to this. It doesn't mean that there was resolution. This isn't the exam, This is where my thing about school, that there's right and wrong, either A, B, or C. But you know what? A C may be good enough for now. Let me come back to it in 6 weeks. My brain's ready for, Chem 101, and I'll get an A. But we have to have this finality, this resolution. And the world doesn't work that way. It seems that we always circle back around. And how can we get done what we need to get done today?
Right.
And then move on and come back to it some later time.
I want to say one thing I really
Please.
liked about what you were talking about in the room. Is that going through the process of showing me what was on the walls, and I was happy to see all kinds of, there was charts, there were tables, there was diagramming going on, that the room itself was laid out in a way that there was an actual, you showed me the process. We started in this space in the room, and then we moved to this space in the room, and then we moved to this space in the room, so it was all visual and spatial. And then you said to me that in the next stage, what we're going to do is we're going to actually bring in objects.
Right.
So there is, once again, there's going to be the now we're getting to the nitty-gritty of having the visual triggers in our hands. In this case, they're three-dimensional, but still, it's the visual triggers in our hands to see if that will stimulate the process of coming up with a new way of combining them, recombining them, breaking them down, substituting, so on and so forth. Why? Because we think visually.
Yep. And that room came about, Dean, and the process was just like your fifth rule here of your 5 rules was flow, And Flow, and you called it one other thing too, and I didn't write it down.
The storyboard?
The storyboard.
Right.
Flow and storyboard.
Telling the story.
Telling the story.
Right.
And this was just telling the story in our brain that, you know, we have a big problem in our machine shop, that there's a lot of complexity, and why can't we get things done in a sequence? Well, you don't understand the complexity. And I said, okay, well, help me understand that. Tell me what I need to know inside your brain. And then we graphically pulled out all the numbers, and we figured out that we had a tool constraint problem.
Okay.
We have a machine with 12 tools, and we can do two dissimilar things. And if we have 6 tools on one side dedicated for that job and 6 on this side, we can do anything in the world. But the world doesn't happen that way. We have tools that are 7 and 8. So we answered those questions and showed them that 85% of the time, you never have more than 6 tools. As a matter of fact, you usually have less. Mm-hmm. And if you're trying to match and make all these things happen, just have the rule that 6 tools or less, and then forget it. If it's 3 or 2 or 1, don't worry about it. Just put it on and go. So we showed them 85% of the time they usually have 6 tools or less. Mm-hmm. So we're solving for 15%. And then they said, well, you don't understand. That 15% is a big headache. And it's all the. I said, all right, what thought process are you using now? Well, we have this and that, and that's what we moved into the next portion of our storyboard or our flow.
Right.
And then the tools. And I'm sure even once we bring the pieces out, that there's going to be another chapter on that storyboard.
Oh, sure. And I'll bet when you bring the pieces out, there'll be, because you'll have the visual thing of comparison, you might be able to find a way of combining two tools, or combining a step out that would eliminate a tool. But it won't happen until you actually see the things next to one another. So it's a fascinating process, and I want to know how that goes.
Yeah, I will definitely fill you in on that. The book was 80% accountability.
Accountable.
Oh, accountable. 80% accountable. We don't know the author, but we'll post it. 80% accountable. So let's go back to one of Dean's. Let's go back to Jack Welch, because I want him to really explain, you know, to the viewing audience. Because you look at this, and the things that pop out for me, if Dean dropped his notebook and I picked it up, well, I know right away he was talking about Jack Welch. I don't have to look through lines of paper.
Right.
And there was something Jack talked about: issues, love, Steve Jobs, and cool. So that, as a passive onlooker, those things would pop out to me. So give me some of the thought process here on this.
As he was speaking, of course, I had to sort because he was speaking very anecdotally, and then he was sometimes either starting with what would be the equivalent of an executive summary, or sometimes just finishing out with a big closing statement. So the first thing I pulled out here is every personnel appointment has to match the importance or the intensity of the issue, and I threw importance and intensity together, and I framed them, and the issue being whatever reason they were being hired.
Yep.
The next. He said, you have to be authentic, and he said there are no secrets. I thought, okay, that's interesting.
Yep.
Then he said something very important about the work environment, because he was speaking to executives. He said, you have to love where you are. Okay, Jack Welch talking about love. Love is a very powerful word, which is why I colored it up, and I used the symbol of a heart in the middle of the word. But be ready to move on, and so there's somebody sort of racing towards the door. And then finally, this next piece, I was surprised that Jack Welch would talk about Steve Jobs, who had just passed away the week before, I believe. And he said that Steve Jobs defined cool, and the very fact that Jack Welch would use the word cool and put Steve Jobs in the context of being cool was... I would not have thought of Jack Welch talking in that context. No. So that's the point of those things sticking out, and the quick summary of a 40-minute conversation.
Yeah. So what kind of things can you share with our listeners here? We have probably about 5 minutes, Ed?
In 5 minutes, I would say, please, if you're interested in finding out more of visual problem solving as applied to workplace environments or business environments, I'm very open and happy to help out. I think that nobody should be afraid of or think that they need to have the ability to draw in
Right.
order to be able to do visual problem solving.
It's a powerful tool to big vague problems because it gets everybody into that playful, fun, creative, right brain side. Because let's post Dean's. Is that his email, Ed? And do we have a website? It's a website. So you have a website there. But this tool, before the show we were talking about you going to a strategy session, with a C-level group.
Right.
And bringing in crayons, doing some things, and having some fun with these guys and looking at problems in a different way because they keep looking at problems. Our industry and world keeps looking at problems in the same way and expecting different results, and sometimes that just doesn't work that way.
No. I'll just as a closing anecdote, I walked into an executive meeting where they had to reformat their business operation.
Right.
We had 2 days, and there was paper up on the walls, and I had a box of coloring sticks, I'll call them.
Yep.
There were markers, and they had a very famous brand which are known for children's markers.
Yep.
And one of the executives said to me, "Oh, are we going to be coloring? My daughter likes to color." I said, "Yep, and I'm not even going to ask you to draw within the lines." And then we went to work, and within the process of facilitating the meeting, I was taking notes on the paper, was recording with words and with visual images, and at the first break, after 2.5 hours, I asked him, I said, "Was this helpful to you in the process?" He said, "Yes, very much so." He said, "I was able to look up and very quickly remember details of what we've been speaking about, and also it stimulated other ideas. Just the visual things, the metaphors that you put up, sort of allowed my mind to wander in a different way and bring new things to the table. So it was helpful."
Yeah. So. Again, with Dean being here, this is all practice. In Lean, there are a set of tools, they're practice, and Dean has a structure. 5 tools in 15 minutes for looking at things. And it's to find the tools that work for you. It really is. It's to find the tools. You can modify the tools a little, but it's just getting a standard process and thinking about it and then looking at how we're going to use this, because too many times people become confined, they become paralyzed by the thought of making decisions or, making the wrong decisions. But this is a way to kind of liberate yourself and say, I've done this before and I had a pretty good outcome.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more predictable, the outcome.
Yes.
So I want to thank you for being on Lean Nation.
I appreciate the invite. Thank you so much.
And we'll post all this on Facebook and Lean Nation. And until then, we'll see you next week live in Las Vegas. We'll be out at the World of Concrete show, and hopefully we'll have a really lively show for you with a lot of thought leaders. And we're over and out for today.